All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I will say, reading the chat is always my favorite part of the hour. I'd delay a little longer potentially if I could. I see we've got Italy and the UK and South Africa and India and all over the United States. It's great to have so many of you joining us from all over the globe. It's just so exciting to know that this is such a global conversation, and so we will wish you a happy Friday, wherever it is you may be tuning in from. A couple of those places may already be Saturday, as a matter of fact. But we're so glad that you could join us for the August edition of the Meeting the Moment webinar from the Saul Zaentz Charitable Foundation. My name is Dan Worry. I am an educator and an author, and I wear a number of different hats professionally. But boy, one of the ones that I am most proud of is that I serve as a strategic advisor to the foundation, which of course honors and extends the legacy of music mogul and film producer Saul Zaentz. And our Meeting the Moment webinar series is designed to do exactly that. We endeavor to shine a spotlight on some of our moments, really most timely topics, in particular as they relate to children and families. And today, while we have a timely conversation to be digging into around the promise and the peril of artificial intelligence in education. I am joined today by an amazing panel of experts. As always, Dr. Dana Suskind is a pediatric surgeon and a best-selling author and director of the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health at the University of Chicago. Our other guests, Beck Tench and Danby Kim, are both with the Center for Digital Thriving at the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Project Zero. Beck is the senior researcher and designer there. Danby is an AI fellow at the center. And so just the right people to have this conversation. As we get going, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. As always, later in the hour, we will turn to you for your questions. And so in order to facilitate that, make that a little bit easier for us, we would ask if you have a question for the panel, please use the Q&A function down in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and use the Q&A as opposed to the chat. You can see already that the chat moves very quickly. We want to encourage you to use the chat to converse with one another throughout the hour, to make friends, to respond to the panel. But if you have a question in particular, you will really maximize our chances of seeing it later in the hour if you can separate those questions out, put them in the Q&A. I am also excited to tell you that we have today not just one the announcement around future episodes of this series, but information on three upcoming Meeting the Moment webinars from September through November. And throughout the course of the hour, we will drop into the chat the registration information for all three of those. And I will tease quickly just to tell you that on September 15th, our next episode, we will be spotlighting some really innovative programs happening around the country that connect teachers and also family childcare programs with affordable housing. And so we'll be exploring that sort of intersection between education and affordable housing on September 15th. On October 28th, boy, am I thrilled about this, we will be joined for the full hour by Dr. Howard Gardner of Harvard. Many of you know, if you've been certainly in a teacher ed program in the past several decades, you know Dr. Gardner as truly one of the most renowned education theorists of our time. He is responsible for the theory of multiple intelligences, among other things. His landmark book, Frames of Mind, is being prepared for re-release next year. And so in October, we will talk to him about sort of how he sees the current landscape and how maybe his thinking has grown and evolved since the publication of Frames of Mind originally some 40 years ago. And then on November 20th, we will be joined by Isabel Howe of Stanford University, who is the author of the fantastic new book, Love to Learn, and Dr. Junlei Lee of the Zaentz Initiative at Harvard to talk about the power of early relationships, early relational health. So three fantastic upcoming sessions. Let's see if I can maybe I can drop those links right into the chat here right now as we're talking about it. Sure enough, here they come. So if you would like, I'll drop that off clipboard into the chat a couple times throughout the hour so that you can register in advance, be among the first to get involved with those. Each of those at 12 p.m. Eastern time, just as this session is, which we find is a nice sweet spot for this international audience that we can get viewers on the West Coast like Beck, but then we can also reach into Europe as well. So anyway, look forward to seeing you hopefully for all three of those fantastic sessions coming up. But for right now, let's go ahead and jump into our topic for the day, which is again, artificial intelligence in education. And Dana, I want to begin with you and in early childhood, though our conversation today, certainly won't be limited to early childhood. It is interesting when I announced on social media the topic of this session, as you might imagine, had some really interesting replies from within the early childhood community in particular, expressing some real alarm about even the prospect of AI in the lives of young children. And you wrote a really thought-provoking op-ed back in June that was published by The Hill that really sounded a lot of the same alarm bells, if you will, that I heard on social media this week about how AI sort of has the potential to rewire childhood. If you will. And so, curious to hear from you both about the concerns, obviously, that you expressed in The Hill, but know that you are also working on some really innovative projects that are using AI in ways that might not be the ones that people immediately think of. I think, when we talk about AI in early childhood, there's immediately this assumption, oh, it's going to replace human interaction, or it's going to become the teacher in a way that the people maybe aren't comfortable with, and that maybe I myself am guilty of kind of thinking in that way and not thinking about some of the innovative ways that it may actually be a support to early childhood teachers, to parents as well. So maybe Dana, kick us off a little bit with a little bit of context, maybe recapping some of those arguments from The Hill around, where do you see the major threat from AI, in particular around early childhood development, and where might be these brighter spots where we may find it really useful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Dan. As always, it's so wonderful to be here and to hear your voice. You are an inspiring light in the field. So yeah, no, great question. It's something that I've been thinking a lot about for some time. And I think I want to first contextualize this idea that AI, first of all, is not a monolith, right? It's not just generative AI. AI at some level right now is just a tool. Until we get AGI and autonomous robots, it is a tool. And tools are neither good or bad. Their impact really depends on how we use them. So if we build AI with responsibility to the greater good in mind, right, the potentials are staggering, right? We can diagnose disease earlier, close educational gaps, accelerate climate solutions, empower people with disabilities. I mean, there's so much good that can happen. With that being said, as you said, from both my own op-ed and lots of discussions out in the world, as a physician and a scientist who studies early childhood development, I am very concerned about the implications of introducing generative AI, that interactive AI, into young children's lives without really understanding evidence of its safety, without, as you mentioned, protecting that irreplaceable human interaction that's core to human development. Because we're we're witnessing something that we've never seen before. The first generation of children who actually grow up alongside artificial intelligence, right? We heard about the iPad generation and the likes. This is not screen time. This is something completely different. Technology that can actually activate the same social neural circuits as human caregivers during the most critical period. So first, let me just say, what is the promise, right? Look, I'm a cochlear implant surgeon, so I'm not anti-tech, but this tech of cochlear implants are about bringing, human connection and communication together. And what I view as the best of AI tools will do the same, right? They'll amplify human connection rather than replacing it, and give insights. I mean, you can imagine AI helping, overwhelm teachers or parents understand, notice subtle developmental differences in milestones, translating babies' cries, giving personalized strategies for supporting at home, lifting up administrative burdens. There are so much good that can happen. But really, the peril is just as real, very significant. As I mentioned, responsive AI can trigger the same social brain circuitry as humans do. So, research, even infants as young as 6 months, show the same physiologic response to an interactive agent as a human. And they're not just momentary blips, they're really helping guide those neural connections that make us human, for blueprints, not just about language development, but empathy, communication, emotional regulation. And, by interacting a lot with these types of replacements, it will rewire the brain in ways that we can't even imagine or know, right? I mean, not only that, but if children grow up expecting the same sort of flawless on-demand responsiveness that AI agents can give. I mean, we're seeing adult humans, wanting to marry AI agents because they're so much easier to deal with. These young babies and children aren't going to learn, how to navigate the messiness of human interaction. Anyway, so I am not anti-tech, but I feel very strongly that we need to be very much part of this discussion. And one of the most important guiding principles, and I'll end it very quickly, is, supplement, don't substitute. AI that lifts burdens, so parents and teachers have more time to connect, that's a gift. AI that replaces, bedtime stories or that human interaction, that is a gamble. And with that, I will stop and turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Dana. Look forward to teasing some of that out over the course of the hour. But Beck, why don't I turn to you at this point? Your work at the Center for Digital Thriving is, I know, a little more focused on older learners, and that, as the center's name implies, it has a lot to do with this balance, right, between the ways that we need to be critical of tech, but also, how we can find reasons for optimism. It just strikes me that we're in this really weird place, though, right now. That, I feel like we read a lot about, voices like Dana's coming to the forefront and saying, hey, we need to be really thoughtful, really cautious about the ways and how quickly, this is expanding. And at the same time, it feels very much like we are in almost like an international arms race, to see, who can develop this most rapidly and sort of gain control of this emerging technology. I know, there's been legislation here recently to even to limit states' abilities to, to put any sort of guardrails um, around this. So it's an odd place to be, both sort of urging caution and also putting our foot down on the gas pedal, just as, as intensely as we can. What's your sense of this moment when it comes to the regulation of AI, and how is the team at the center seeing it sort of seep into education, into our classrooms in ways maybe that are both helpful and, as our title today implied, maybe a little perilous?
Mm. Thank you, Dan. I want to also echo Dana's. So nice to hear your voice. That's just something very comforting coming from the South. Just hearing you speak. Um, I want to start a little in the perilous, but hopefully we'll get to the hope by the end. My sense of this moment is it's we're hearing, at least from educators, it's a bit of a Wild West kind of moment. It's very chaotic. Um, it's hard for educators to keep pace with the evolution of the technology. And so what we're seeing is we have some data that we just collected this spring, that 80% of schools are still without policies regulating AI at all. And then in the 20% that do have policies, really a lack of clarity on like what violates those policies and what the consequences of those violations are. And the consequences of those violations being very wide ranging, from just sort of a slap on the wrist to expulsion. So I think that like by and large, educators aren't necessarily feeling supported. I imagine Danby will talk a bit about about professional development and literally like asking educators if they're receiving PD around AI, and they're laughing because no, they're not receiving it. We have a mind shift at the center that we encourage educators to move from a sense of being a referee of tech behavior to a sense of being a coach of tech behavior. But when it comes to AI, it's like asking them to coach a game they've never played. And it's a lot easier just hand them a whistle and tell them what is out of bounds, and to blow it when they see the rule being broken. So I think that I think it's kind of difficult right now. That's my sense of things. In terms of this international arms race and how it's showing up in the classroom, there are a few things that come to mind for me. One is that the pace of the technology is shifting so fast, and the hype cycle is integrating features into software that both teachers and students have been using for a long time that weren't AI enabled, and now they are, and they're having to navigate what is and isn't okay, what does or doesn't violate, because the software is literally changing under their feet. So, for example, Grammarly, which used to be completely okay to use, is now actually kind of questionable and could be a violation. Or from an educator standpoint, you know, having a one-to-one laptop that is Windows based and Copilot is everywhere, or just using Google and now you get an AI answer right at the top of the screen. So trying to navigate how quickly these technologies are evolving and incorporating features that are AI alongside what is and isn't possible with learning is is pretty difficult. And we're also seeing both young people and educators talk about the role parents are playing and pressuring their kids to figure this stuff out because it's their future, and that creating problems both for young people who maybe have ethical concerns about it and needing to figure it out anyway, and also for educators who, you know, parents are pressuring their kids to violate policies because they want the kids to just figure out the tool. So that's sort of like my kind of perilous view, and how it is. But we're hearing also really great things about it too. As Dana said, this is just this, at least for now, this is a tool, and we're seeing some really amazing things happen too. So, for example, educators are telling us that the students who use it well are thriving, and they are doing things that they were never able to do before. We just had a professional development um, uh, that we ran last week called the AI Explorers Club. We had 150 educators sign up for 30 spots. The people that showed up were just so enthusiastic, so sincerely wanting to meet this moment well. I think the appetite is there from an educator standpoint to learn these tools. And I think that most moving for me, at least, is a story that I heard earlier this week from an educator who said that at his school, they are using AI in their MTSS meetings, multi-tier support systems meetings, where they have students who may be struggling and they have all these constraints as to how they can receive supports. And so it's really hard to meet the students' needs. And so they're using AI to put all of those constraints in and still locate evidence-based practices that will support them. And he said that like 2 years ago, when they weren't using the tool, students would often, graduate from needing level 2 support to needing level 3 support. But this last year, having used AI in those meetings to figure out ways to support them, they're seeing students either plateau at the level that they're at or even go back into level 1 support. And we're hearing examples of educators really kind of like using AI to help their students in really, really meaningful ways. So I think there is hope as well. But yeah, it's a mixed bag. Tech is both for sure in this situation.
Beck, I want to follow up on one thing you said about the sort of the thriving of students that are using it well.
Hmm.
I think, maybe to those of us who are not working day to day in classrooms right now, I think our minds immediately go to these use cases of teachers talking about students using it to write their term papers or to,
Yeah.
complete their homework for them, those sorts of things. And you said, the kids that are using it well, the students that are using it well, are really thriving. How would you define using it well?
Mm.
What does that look like?
Danby and I love to talk about this. Uh, so I think that in a lot of ways, using AI well involves a lot of self-knowledge. Self-knowledge into the ways that you want to grow and the ways that you may need specific support and then how the tool works, of course. And so when you have those three together, you can you can use AI to fill gaps that you have in your comprehension or learning, and you can use it to amplify things that you're already good at, and you have strengths. So I'll give some examples. Um, you know, it's an excellent tool for research. So we'll hear educators talk about young people, being able to find things that they wouldn't normally be able to find just via Google, but also um, to create challenge problems so that they are extending their understanding of a particular subject more than the teacher could, or to have the tool explain things to them in a way that the teacher is not able to explain things to them. We're even seeing sometimes young people are having who are afraid to ask questions, either because they're really shy or the teacher is a personality of the teacher, and are able to find the answers that they would need, that they would normally feel too kind of apprehensive to ask in class. Just basically custom supports for the learning that you want to do and that you care about, and using the tool to draw out those things.
Debbie, I want to let you sort of jump into the conversation and maybe extend on some of what Beck was saying. I mean, I feel like we've heard from both Dana and Beck. Um, Teachers aren't getting the professional development that they might need here. That this is, parents are maybe struggling to keep pace. I know, I am. I've been looking forward to this conversation just to learn more from all three of you. It seems like this is a time though, where if nothing else, we need some real critical literacy for the important adults in children's lives, that the teachers and the parents and frankly in some cases probably the policymakers who are making decisions around how this works, are able to get educated and able to really start making more and more informed um, decisions here. Is that right from your perspective? And if so, what does that look like? And are there existing sources to whom parents, for example, can turn, that teachers can turn?
Thank you so much, Dan, for this platform and opportunity to contribute to this timely conversation. I feel very honored to be in this room. So a couple of things that come to mind. So a lot of people that I meet say that they're AI skeptics, right? And then a lot of the times I follow up by saying, have you used AI? And they say no. And so there's a difference between skeptical and there's like being critical, right? And I think being critical requires having a certain level of information and awareness of the benefits and also the limitations of AI. So I think the way that I like to approach critical AI literacy or AI literacy in general is a sequence approach. So you need to first start with a certain functional understanding of how these AI tools work. And I'm not only talking about the demystification of AI, where you're understanding, how these models are built, but also understanding by using these tools, what are the affordances and limitations that are relevant for you. As an educator, it could be lesson planning. As a high schooler, it could be drafting a statement of purpose in a really meaningful way. And so once you have some sort of a practical understanding or foundation of these tools in a way that's relevant, you can then invite critical perspectives. So why are outputs looking like this? Why are outputs looking so hallucinating? Or why is this model or agent or bot acting so sycophantic and validating? So I think my personal encouragement to everyone on the call is to really explore these tools in a way not to promote them or blindly adopt them, but also just think about, how is this relevant for me? And then invite the critical aspects of why is human discernment so important when you're interacting with AI, and why are also ethical considerations important. And I think without that practical understanding, you can easily fall into that perspective of a skeptic. So now onto the topic of reliable sources. There are tons of frameworks and resources about how to foster AI literacy and the critical dimension of AI literacy. Oftentimes people talk about critical thinking being one of the most important skills in the age of AI. And it's true, but critical thinking is not something I believe you can teach. Like, critical thinking is a muscle you build by having those opportunities to be like, oh, why is this looking like that? So I think that's why immersing and tinkering with these tools is so important. So let me give you a concrete example of how I like to practice like critical literacy. So I use AI to make sense of really like jargon stuff, right? So if I'm trying to look at the terms and conditions of these AI platforms and what they're doing with my data, I can use ChatGPT or Claude to really break down the legal jargon and then fact checking that, right? But I want a human expert to look at that, because maybe if I take that at face value, right, the AI generated output, I might be actually completely getting it wrong. So that's what I do. I call my close friend in Berlin, who's a data privacy lawyer, and then I ask questions. So this way you're using AI as a tool to help you really understand things that you don't, but then you also invite that like human level of expertise. So it's funny because a lot of people talk about, okay, I'm a power AI user and I don't talk to humans anymore. Actually, my experience has been opposite. So because I use AI to try to gain an understanding, a deeper understanding of new domains, it's like I'm a novice in these domains. I use AI, it kind of gives me it's like a democratization to access the knowledge and tinkering in a way. But then I call up like my friends, whether it be in the creative industry or in the legal domain, and I'm like, hey, my dear friend expert, before we would never talk about our work like that. But so my experience has been that I am actually closer to my friends than before, because I'm able to really rely on the expertise in a way that I couldn't. So I think it's, again, a certain level of intentionality that you bring to how you use these tools. And then one last thing I wanted to say, just because Beck was mentioning PD, like professional development opportunities for educators. One of the biggest gaps that I saw when I came to Cambridge from this San Francisco Bay Area was that I attended so many AI literacy workshop, webinars, and lectures because I saw like the overwhelm that a lot of educators had. And the way that they refer to AI was AI as an indecipherable black box. And I really could not understand that initially, coming from like the Silicon Valley, because everyone was using it left and right to supercharge their intelligence. And why are educators feeling like this is a black box, despite the fact that this is the most interactive version or generation of AI? It's generative AI. And so then what I realized when you went to these kind of, programming around AI literacy, it was talking purely on the theoretical levels. Okay, how are these models built? What are the ethical implications? And so a lot of the times I would ask my next door neighbor, hey, do you feel like, by the way, like, do you feel like you can use AI a bit better after this session? They're like, nope. And so then I realized, wow, okay, so it's really important for people to actually explore these tools, right? To understand what it can and cannot do. And so that was also a part of the professional development program that we designed at the Center for Digital Thriving. We wanted to not only invite these perspectives of like, how do my values, how do my level of expertise, whether I'm entering as a novice or an expert, how does that shape how I use AI and what I think is appropriate or inappropriate? That's important. But then guide the conversation, be like, okay, let's tinker. Okay, so let's use these tools and then invite the participants to make sense of that experience. There's one thing, it's like you use the AI, right? In a functional way, in a practical way, in a personal or professional way. But then you also have an experience as a human experience using the AI that's very, very complex. There's so many emotions that go into that, lots of tensions. Am I using it too much? Is this appropriate? What are other people going to think of me? And then, so basically when you have that immersion into the application layer, then you invite the participants, let's unpack this. As like Beck says, it's a fine line, but how do we stretch it like an accordion to really give visibility to not the use of it, but the experience of it, as Emily at the center also talks about.
Debbie, you said something that stuck with me that I just wanted to probe a little bit more on. You talked about developing this critical literacy for parents, for teachers, and so on. Depends in part on are really developing some sense of how these tools are constructed, how they're trained. Are there generalized messages that, are there big picture lessons that you would want to share with people who are watching around how these tools are constructed, what those limitations are, or and I genuinely I don't know the answer to this question, or is it something that you almost have to do case by case and tool by tool to understand how that one in particular is constructed?
That's such a good question. That one video that comes to mind that we produced at the center was about theory of mind and AI. The fact that like AI doesn't think for itself. And despite the fact that like AI seems so all-encompassing and all-knowing, it doesn't have any metacognition to say, okay, I'm thinking about something or catching itself or knowing that it's saying something wrong. And so being able to like explain that without getting into the overwhelming language of like neural networks, natural language processing, that's, I think, the key challenge. Technologists and engineers are terrible at describing technical concept in a way that's accessible and relatable. And I think that's what the center is so incredibly good at doing. Let's take something that everyone should know about, the fact that AI is not this sentient being, but why is it not sentient, and describe it in a way that's really understandable and easy to follow. And so that video really comes to mind. It was only a 3-minute video. And I remember when I was working on it, I was like, oh my God, this is like, because I also get into my engineering mindset. I have a CS background. And so it was like really flexible. I call it brain yoga, right? Like just like, oh, how do I communicate this in a way that everyone can understand? And so I'm more than happy to provide that video as a resource to participants who attended this. So again, Dan, in answer to your question, I would say really just make content accessible that really touches on the fact that like AI is not the sentient being. And what also do we mean by intelligence, right? And also that's a lot of what Howard Gardner's work is about. How do we define intelligence? So when we say artificial intelligence and we don't have a universal understanding of what intelligence means, so there's so many different ways we can tackle the demystification of AI in a way that's not, okay, neural networks 101. Like how do we talk about it with people in a way that's relatable to them?
I want to remind everyone we're gonna jump here in just a couple of minutes, and I'm gonna try to carve out a little more time than we typically do to get to your questions. I see some great ones in the Q&A already. Dana, I want to circle back to you though a little bit though and ask about I mentioned in sort of setting up that initial question that in addition to the dangers that you have examples of work that you're doing right this minute that are harnessing some of this, not in ways that replace the relationship between adults and children, but that actually help the adults in this case to maybe to better interact um, with children. And I wondered if you wanted to, I don't know how much you want to talk about specific projects you're working on, but wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of give some examples so that maybe people in our early childhood space who sort of begin by cringing over this um, might go, oh, wow, I can see where that really might be helpful.
Yeah, no, and I want to also respond to the amazing
Please.
colleagues on this. I think that what's really, I mean, as mentioned, AI has huge opportunity, but there is, a fundamental issue in the early childhood space. We talk about something called algorithmic bias, and people often talk about algorithmic bias as it relates to race or ethnicity and not having representative samples. The truth of the matter is, there is a huge dearth of data on the early childhood space. It's the reason that AI agents and social robots don't understand children. So you can debate all we want about the use of generative AI in the early childhood space from a developmental perspective, but from a practical logistical perspective, it cannot work at this point, right? Because AI, first of all, something called ASR, which is automated speech recognition, they can't even really understand children. It's a major issue. So for all of those out in the early childhood space, it's a fundamental difference in the early childhood space. Number two, I love this idea of teaching AI literacy to the masses. It's critically important, and the experiential aspect is critically important. But I also want to put forth the idea that it is an undue, huge burden put on individuals, which we have to address. But it's sort of like asking me every time I go to a grocery store to say, okay, what is in this food? Is this going to be good or bad for me, right? And as a society, we've said, look, you don't have to have a nutrition background to be able to eat healthily, right? You need to be able to have an AI label. So I also want to put forth this idea that we need AI literacy from the crib to Cambridge, where you are, Danby. But at the same time, we also need to think from a policy perspective how it is that we support individuals as we navigate this brave new frontier. So that's one thing. The work that we're doing as mentioned, I'm an implant surgeon, so I believe that technology can really help us as individuals and as a society if we use it in the right way. So we at the center are working on technology that actually is about measuring human interaction and advancing it. I don't want to go into great detail, but I do think that there are ways that AI, so much of AI is about replacing humans. I mean, much of the discussion, but I think that there's opportunity for what I like to call pro-social AI, that is not just human-centered, but actually towards the larger goal of making us better humans and being able to connect. We've got a crisis of connection, as we know, in society that could be the result of or exacerbated by a lot of technology, which is sort of a perverse incentive to say, okay, well, we need technology to help us connect better, but we certainly do. And so that's a lot of the work and thinking that we're doing in the early childhood space. So.
And Jim asked a really interesting question in the Q&A that I thought was well suited for you. He says, hoping to hear your perspective on AI's impact on our long-term neurological and behavioral development. What will happen when curiosity atrophies as a result of AI?
First, I love that question because I think so many people talk about the advent of AI and AGI, and it's going to take over the world and, replace humans, which, will go the way of the dodo bird. And maybe that's true. But I think a more likely sort of scenario is the fact that by embedding, we as humans, all technologic revolutions from drawings on the cave to the printing press have shifted our neurologic connections, right? We rewire our brains based on experience, and this will, without a doubt, change our brain wiring. And so I think about the human species and how this could change us significantly as a species. What does it mean to have early attachment to an automaton? I don't know. I can hypothesize. So this idea that, we talk about what are the 21st century skills that we need to thrive, in this world of AI. And ironically, so many of them, critical thinking, creativity, empathy, all the stuff that we hear all the time. Well, those are the skills that are actually built by human connection, by the skills we're worried about eroding from AI are the skill that we need for this next generation are actually built by human to human connection. So I don't know, Jim, I didn't probably answer the question other than to say, yes, we're at an interesting inflection point as a human species.
Right. Beck, there was something I had wanted to ask you that I think David asked a question in the chat that sort of nests really nicely alongside. When we had a prep conversation, the group of us, in advance of this call, and Beck, one of the things that really stood out to me in that conversation was you were talking about how in some cases students, I would think, high school and college students in particular, are kind of terrified to even talk about their use of AI, right? Because there's this ethical question of, in what ways am I using it? Am I violating policies that may or may not even exist at this point? David, so I guess my question for you is, in part around, how do we develop those policies? How do we support students in their ethical use of this technology? And then David is asking, to the extent that schools have AI policies, how often do they incorporate student voice? How often maybe are students involved in helping to put those together?
Love that. Love that question, and bringing that, even just that idea into the space is so important. It's just something that really motivates our work. I would say that, what we're trying to do at least is make some conversations that are really scary possible. And one of the ways that we do that is through design with young people. And so we have a couple of tools to specifically address two really hard conversations in the classroom right now. One is, how could you use AI? And then the other is, how did you use AI? And making both of those conversations psychologically safe, so that we open the doors, and to be frank, to support more connection, both between students and also between the educator and the students. So we have a long tradition at Project Zero, which is our home department at the Center for Digital Thriving, of something called Making Thinking Visible. So we design tools that try to make the things that people are thinking visible. So one of these tools that we have is called Gradients. And it basically is a way to just name all the ways you could use AI, no judgment zone, and then map individually all the ways that could be used onto a scale where on one hand it's totally fine, and on the other hand it crosses a line, but in the middle where there's this really big gray area where it's either mostly okay or you're not really sure, or it feels sketchy. And once you start to do that as individuals, you see that young people are actually already drawing lines. They are thinking about these things, and that all of those lines are different because we have different, contexts and different ethical frameworks and different values. And so, something may be okay for you that it's not okay for someone else. And that allows you to have a conversation that young people tell us they really want to have, but they're afraid to have. So making that part safe. And then Danby mentioned earlier this idea of the accordion, another activity that we're we're prototyping actively right now is, so there's this concept Ethan Mollick introduced called the secret cyborg. And it is essentially when you use AI, but you don't tell someone that you did. And, we're all walking around with a lot of secret cyborgs, and we are secret cyborgs too. If we're using AI at all, surely we have moments of that. So this is a tool that helps you to like remember a moment when you were a secret cyborg and map that across time, map your emotions, map the questions that you are asking yourself, what you did and why you did it, and then share that with someone else in a way that feels curious and safe instead of shameful. And we've got a lot of different creative ways to do it, but it's essentially taking, in fact, I'll show you, I have a little prototype here. It's essentially taking like what was going to happen and what did happen, and then expanding that to really start to illustrate what was happening in between, and what can we learn about that for when it actually happens the next time. We can actually spread the moment and think about it actively. So yeah, we do a lot of work around, figuring out and respecting your values and ethics, and then making the conversations that involve those things safer so that we can kind of understand where young people are right now.
Great. Tampi, there's a question Sarita is asking in the chat that I thought would be perfect for you. I know you got into this work in part as as the founder of a startup in Silicon Valley yourself. She is asking, noting that all technological tools hold significant potential when they are applied for the greater good. But that one of the questions is about who is developing these tools? Are they being developed by corporations with a profit motive in mind, or for the greater good? What role does Silicon Valley itself play in sort of policing this conversation?
I think I could talk about this for several hours, so I'll try to keep it short. I'll start by saying the North Star metric for most tech companies is engagement. You want people to use the tool more, which sounds like reasonable, right? You're like, okay, you built something, you want to use it more. But when you think about it in the learning context, the reason why I came to Harvard is because I wanted to work on an ed tech product. It was something that I've always been meaning to do, but I worked in different verticals. And so I felt, but then when I started looking into ed tech in the San Francisco Bay Area, I quickly realized most edtech founders had zero teaching experience, zero understanding of learning sciences and pedagogy. And so that really scared me. If you've never taught, if you've never studied this in a much more like evidence-based way, and I didn't want to be in that category. So I came to Harvard. And so what I'm trying to say here is that it's really important. You're designing products in the learning context where it's like so engaging. But a lot of learning sciences show that sometimes you need to take a beat. Sometimes you need your brain to rest. You need to restore your attention. And this is also a lot of what Beck specializes in, attention restoration therapy. But tech is not designed to be like that, because if you're going to venture capital and you need to show, okay, my users are using this an X amount of time, but then especially in the learning context, I think that gets very, very dangerous. And so one thing that one passion project of mine now is how do we bridge this gap that a lot of ed tech is being built and designed and pushed by technologists and really talented engineers, and not learning scientists and educators themselves. So the way that I try to address this is Cambridge is a really good environment because you have lots of technologists, but you also have lots of educators. And so I conceptualized this event with collaborators called the Ed Hack, where we brought like bleeding edge like AI hackers. I'm talking about big time nerds. They like know, they're in the know about the latest AI stuff. And then we brought in educators and from real classrooms. There's so many schools in Cambridge. And then we designed a 12-hour sprint for them to collaborate together. Now, why is that important? I think for me, I always try to design for win-win situations. So a lot of these hackathons that involve educators are like technologists pretty much mentoring them. So it's not a peer-to-peer collaboration. So what's really important for us to invite AI hackers or technologists that really wanted to build educational tools and really felt committed to understanding more from educators and real classroom challenges. And so then there's a gain for technologists versus, oh, I'm just going to coach like, educators about how to use AI. And then what do the educators benefit from that? Well, they're immersing in the application layer. They're actually seeing what custom, hyper niche, contextualized tools are now possible with the advent of generative AI. And one thing that is also another North Star is Professor Chris Deedy here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education talks to me often about doing things better versus doing better things. So the way that you distinguish that is doing things better is you can use generative AI to teach the same thing, same curriculum, maybe more efficiently and maybe more adaptively and personalized. But doing better things is more sci-fi. And this is actually a participant in our AI Explorers Club professional development program said that. I think in today's society, you need to really think about what couldn't we do before, right? Like in terms of like designing and implementing learning experiences that we can now with this technology. And so I think those ideas, like doing better things, come about when you have interdisciplinary perspectives. So you have now rich, diverse human expertise guiding how to use AI and how to collaborate. So this is really a newfound passion of mine to make sure that the next generation of edtech is not just being driven by user engagement in mind by technologists because they're so good at building, but also inviting the people who have deep understanding, like actual lived experiences of classroom challenges and the constraints so that the collaboration is meaningful and human-centered.
Absolutely. We're approaching the top of the hour, which pains me because I feel like we could spend hours talking about this. I want to ask a lot of you asks a good question in the Q&A. We for years talked about the digital divide, right, between maybe our most and least affluent families, that whether families had access to to devices and to Wi-Fi. I think we've come a long way in a lot. I think we advanced at least through our K-12 systems. I think a good bit during COVID on that topic when suddenly things had to be remote. But is asking this question about how do we make sure that this tech doesn't end up as another way of amplifying inequity between these families. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Dana, please.
Yeah, it's actually something that weighs on my mind quite a bit. My biggest fear is that ultimately, human connection and interaction will be considered a luxury good of sorts, and certain families will make sure their kids have primarily human teachers and humans raising them, and children who come from less resource backgrounds will have less of it, and it'll be sort of like the organic food differentiation, whereas in the old days, everybody had farm fresh food because that's what happened. And then the industrialization happened and, processed food became a thing. So yeah, that is my biggest fear, that human interaction and connection will become a luxury good, and an artificial will be what everybody else's kids get. So.
Dan, I wanted to jump in with this as well. Dana, I really share that fear. And I do think that maybe I'd say the way that I think about this is a bit on a spectrum. What we're seeing already is that we had this promise that it would shrink the digital divide because it meets you where you are, and it kind of like makes sort of tutors accessible to everyone. But what we're seeing in our data is that lower income schools are much less likely to be allowing AI use. And so that, I think, will trickle into a situation where they just don't have the skills. So I think that we're seeing early signals that it's actually increasing. The digital divide is still happening there. But then you have this other piece, which I think is what Dana is bringing in, which is what are the harms of the tool? What will the harms be? And will access to the tool increase the harms? So not having access to the tool means you're not as harmed by it, right? Uh, so there is this weird interaction there. But all of that said, I think that, and this is Danby touched on this a minute ago with regard to market forces, we're already seeing, if you have a free ChatGPT account versus a $20 a month ChatGPT account versus a $200 a month ChatGPT account, what you're able to do and what you're given access and resources and time and intelligence to be helped with. And I think that, so we're already seeing that even just in that way, the people who have more have more of these tools. They're helped more by these tools. And so I think that in that way I think that we're seeing that. And they're competing in a market that is just going to incentivize engagement, as Danby said. So I think that we're going to see what we've seen already replicate. If I were to offer some advice, I would look at tools that have more portability. If you think about tools that feel locked in and you can't get out, I think that's a real sign that the tool is on an incentive path that is going to as we've seen in all of the social media tools and even the search engines, ultimately result in a poor experience for you in the end.
We've got about 3 minutes left. I want to give each of you a chance, maybe just for a minute apiece, to speak directly. You pick whether it's to parents or to teachers, or maybe both. I think we sometimes don't acknowledge that teachers are parents and so on. So, but Dana, where would you start? I mean, if in a minute or so, if you had one piece of advice for parents who are struggling with, like, I don't quite get this and I'm not sure what to do next, how would you advise them?
That is a very large
That's a
question.
big
I mean,
question for a minute, I know.
turn off the technology. No, I think the biggest thing that I was going to say, and I think it touched on what Danby said, was, I'm deep in it for lots of different reasons. And ironically, it has made me feel actually more connected with the real world and much more appreciative of all those human interactions. So maybe we'll be lucky in sort of the same similar response to social media that we're seeing will trickle down, that, okay, we can be ahead of this curve rather than reactionary, that, human to human engagement and being much more present is the hope for the future. That's I've got lots of things, but I had a minute, so turn it over to whomever.
Debbie, you want to jump in? What any final words of wisdom, advice to parents or teachers?
Yeah, so my humble piece of advice would be, so in the same, like if the analogy is you need to learn how to drive a car, right? Versus being a mechanic and understanding all the complex things that's under the hood, you need to drive a lot to like actually learn how to be a responsible driver. And I'm not encouraging everyone to use AI for everything, but to really empathize with how children, young people may be using it, and to converse with AI in a way that's much more personal. I never used to do that, but then since starting at the center, I really wanted to empathize with teens and their personal conversations and why they feel like this judgment-free zone can be so validating and so soothing. And so when I use that, I also have many aha moments, many existential moments, and then I feel this deep need to, okay, I need to understand this better. And so that's what I would say. If you want to be a responsible driver, you need to understand all these different things, driving on different roads, understanding different etiquette and different cultures, and then also which speed are you going? So all of these things I think apply directly also in the AI space. And so I would highly encourage people to just not be too afraid of the tool, use it in a way that feels somewhat meaningful and relevant for you. notice the challenges involved with that, and then take it one step further and be like, okay, how can I empathize with young people using this, and how can I, like meet them also where they are?
All right, Beck, close us out.
I think I would encourage educators and parents to get really curious about what young people are experiencing. And one of my favorite ways to do that is to ask the question, what are adults missing that you most need us to understand? I think a lot of young people can speak to that in a way that kind of like lowers the barrier of feeling too vulnerable, and you can learn a lot when you hear what they say and you really care about the answer.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say I feel like we almost just barely begun scratching the surface of this conversation. So be ready. I think you'll see more AI topics in this series as time progresses. And panelists, I hope maybe we can invite you back at some point to continue parts of this conversation. What a fascinating topic and conversation generally. I want to thank Dr. Dana Suskind, who is a pediatric surgeon and director of the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health at the University of Chicago, Beck Tench and Danby Kim, who are both of the Center for Digital Thriving, which is a part of Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. What a treat to be in this conversation with you over the past hour. Panel, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this. And as importantly, if not more so, thank all of you for tuning in from from all across the world. Thrilled to have you here, and look forward to continuing not only this conversation on AI, but all of these other meeting the moment topics. Hope you join us in September and beyond, and we look forward to seeing you again real soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.